Hey guys, how you all doing today? It's Jordan here from Switchwatch, back again with another review, this time of The Final Station. Thanks to TinyBuild for providing this review code, so I can tell you guys if it's worth your hard-earned cash or not. Now the question of today is, out of all of the games out there, which one is your favourite that is set in a post-apocalyptic world? There are so many, so tell me your favourite. Let's get on with the review. Post-apocalyptic games have always been around, but there seems to have been a special resurgence in the past few years. The Final Station is yet another indie game set in the bleak future, although this one has a premise very reminiscent of the movie Snowpiercer, a world devastated by the unknown and a train that has to keep moving. The Final Station has one of the more intriguing stories that I've actually witnessed in an indie game, especially of the post-apocalyptic variety, which is a genre that I tend to feel is a bit overdone and predictable these days. The Final Station really hooked me though. It's the classic case of zombie outbreak of not zombies. Yes, that again is very predictable, but I feel that this game really tells it very well. The story follows an everyday train driver tasked with completing a mysterious governmental task in transporting precious cargo. This is during the time after what is dubbed the First Visitation, a catastrophe that decimated the world, although it's never fully clear exactly what happened. You quickly become enlightened when during the transportation of your important package, the Second Visitation commences, and the population begin to be infected and transform into shadowy zombie-esque creatures. It's then the conductor's job to find survivors and transport vital items to fight for the cause, maybe helping to save the world. The story tells a very tragic story, and you really feel for the people involved. I especially found moments on the train to be the most telling as you and the other survivors witness things from afar. Sure, the dialogue presented here may not be all that, but the sense of feeling you get from seeing things visually is very strong, and I was surprised how invested I became with the struggle against the Second Visitation. Surprisingly, I think the audio is a bit of a weak point. This is mainly because of the lack of music as you're playing the game. There's almost zero music in the Final Station, especially during the gameplay. I suppose this is a stylistic choice from the development team to make the world seem more desolate and empty, but nonetheless, I like music. There is a bit of music in the safe zones, and it's nice enough, but I needed more of it, especially some creepy ambience music during the exploration sections. I'd rate the visuals between decent and really good. The characters, environments, and all of that look pretty good. You get some really interesting visual pieces on occasions. My favourite visual parts are by far the backgrounds you'll skim past while travelling on the train. They're huge, varied, and often quite spectacular looking. I think some may bemoan the pixelated sprite work, but I honestly quite like it. I need to note that while the performance was fine for the most part, there is the odd bit of stuttering or two here and there. I think this has to do with when you reach checkpoints in the game, and it is quite noticeable, but it didn't really affect the gameplay for me. The gameplay is divided into two parts: the side-scrolling exploration, adventure part, and the train riding part. They are two very different beasts, but complement each other very well. Starting with the action sections, this is where your train will arrive at one of the many stations in the world. Every time it arrives, it's automatically locked into place for security reasons with a code. While you're exploring the environment, picking up supplies, food, and med packs, you may come across survivors who can be persuaded to go on your train. The main goal of these exploration parts is to find the code to release your train, and these are strategically placed to be discovered right at the end of your wandering. In the meantime, you'll be fighting off a small variety of enemies that want to kill you. You have your standard shufflers, the small fast ones, the ones that blow up after being shot, and even some in armor. They all have to be dealt in different ways. Walking around with the left analog stick, you aim your gun with the right. You don't get full 360 aiming coverage, but it's pretty generous. You'll fire with the ZR button. but you're really going to want to choose your shots carefully. Ammo can be very scarce in the final station. So many times I was desperate for it. You can craft more back on the train, but when you're out in the wild, you're at the mercy of how generous the cupboards, boxes, and containers are in regards to ammo. Your best bet is to use the melee attack as much as possible, as well as going for headshots. I found this aspect made the final station a very tense game. Saying that, it's not particularly difficult. Sure, there are some awkward sections where you may perish at the hands of the monsters which outnumber you if you're not quite prepared, but the game is generous enough with checkpoints that you're never severely punished for dying, and you can quickly retry from where you just died. Maybe some people will find it too lenient, but I was happy I didn't lose a lot of progress, to be honest. There's no greater waste of time in my opinion. As mentioned, in each act you'll find a variety of survivors who will hitch a ride on your train. It's your job to keep them alive. This is partly where the train management side of the game comes in. While riding between stations, you'll have to juggle between keeping your passengers healthy while also keeping the train running, while performing maintenance in the form of pseudo minigames. All passengers have 2 meters that you need to keep an eye on, their health and their hunger. If either of those reach 0, they die. To stop this, you have to give them medpacks or food boxes, both of which are very scarce. One issue I had early on is that the game isn't very good at explaining things. At the beginning, my assistant engineer died because he starved to death, even though at that point I had no idea that could happen. I didn't know about managing the train systems, I didn't know I had to provide food for the passengers. I suppose his death did make me learn very quickly though. Him dying taught me a lesson. It still would have been nice if there was a brief explanation beforehand though. The survivors are a risk versus reward feature. You want to pick them up because dropping them off safely at surviving refuges will give you cash and items. On the other hand, they can be a massive waste of resources, especially in the medkit department. Some survivors will be badly wounded and need treatment fairly often. Using medkits on them will leave you with less for yourself on your adventures. My main gripe with the train sections is that there seems to be only one problem with the train at a time. Either the ventilation is dodgy, the suspension, the precious cargo needs monitoring. It's always one thing, never multiple things at a time, which I found a little on the boring side. It's also difficult to keep track of the dialogue said by the passengers. I was really interested in what they had to say, but I was so busy making sure people weren't dying and taking care of the train, it was impossible to follow their conversations. The 2 separate gameplay sections are actually fairly basic, and taken out of context of this game, may be considered a little too simple for some. However, with the world building, the story, and combining the 2 styles together, make it work very well, and make it feel grander than it actually is. Some may not enjoy the linearity of it, and the predictability of exploring, train journey, exploring, train journey formula, but I enjoyed it. For $19.99 or £13.49, I think you got yourself a good deal with the final station. It's a great little indie game that will probably last you about 5 hours. There's not much room for replaying it though, which you probably need to take into account, but I think the price is worth it. Maybe the American price could have been $1 or $2 lower, but it's not much of an issue. Overall, I think the final station is an excellent game. As far as survival games go, it's one of the more playable in my opinion. It keeps its gameplay fairly simple, but the predictable gameplay loop really had me hooked, always switching between riding the train and going out exploring. The story and the atmosphere provided really did add a lot to it, though had these been lesser, then maybe I wouldn't hold it in the same high regard. It's an interesting concept and I hope we can see more like this from the developers in the future. I'm going to award the final station an 8 out of 10. Okay guys, I hope you've enjoyed this review as much as I enjoyed making it. If you're a regular Switch watcher, you know what to do. Hit that like button and leave a comment below answering the big question today. Which is your favorite game set in a post-apocalyptic world? There's so many out there. If you're new to Switch Watch, then we would love it if you subscribed. We appreciate every single one of our subscribers. You mean the world to us. And of course, head over to switchwatch.co.uk for news, even more reviews that don't appear here. For example, I recently published a review for Bridge Constructor Portal, which won't be getting a video. Go have a read of that. Anyways guys, I've been Jordan from Switch Watch and I'll see you next time.